All set.
All right, good. Good evening. This is the meeting of the Community Preservation Committee of February 3rd, 2021. As a preliminary matter, I am Peter Pingator. I'm the chair of the CPC. I will be confirming all members present by doing a roll call. I'll confirm other persons who we anticipate on the agenda and our staff members as well, just to make sure that everyone can hear us. When I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. And we will go, as I usually do, in alphabetical order. Mr. Albert.
Here.
Mr. Barnes.
Here.
Mr. Crocker.
Here.
Mr. Dermody.
Here.
Ms. Dorfman.
Here.
Ms. Gersel.
Here.
Ms. Kirk.
Here.
And Mr. Zambone, we're waiting for Rick. He may be joining us shortly. And I am present. Oh, let's see. Rick Zambone. All right, Kristen Wright.
Here.
And Karis Lustig.
I'm here.
And Rick Zambone.
I am now here.
Okay, great. All right. This open meeting of the Community Preservation Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of the public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. We are convening by Zoom and as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. That is part of our agenda that is posted for this meeting. Please note, the meeting is being recorded. Some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All of our supporting materials that have been provided, members of this body, are available on the town's website unless I otherwise note. And I think that we all members have our materials that were delivered to us by Karis Lustig by email. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I as a chair note otherwise. Let me go over the ground rules. I'll introduce each speaker on the agenda. After the speaker concludes his or her remarks, I will go down the line of the members in alphabetical order, inviting each of you by name to provide any comments, questions, or other motions. Hold your name, please hold until your name is called. And as I've said in the past, we want to make sure that the record is clear who is speaking at any one time. So if I fail to provide your name, please make sure that you state your name on the record. Speak clearly in order that we can have accurate minutes. And wait for response, wait until I yield the floor to you and state your name before speaking. And remember that each vote we take will be conducted by a roll call vote. So those are our ground rules pursuant to the governor's emergency order and our requirements in terms of meeting remotely. Updates, chairman's updates, first item on the agenda. I just want to note two things. One is that we're having this chairs meeting on February 10th. And so that will involve chair of the select board, the chair of the school committee, and this chair. And the focus of that meeting will be Emory Grover and the school committee's commitment, if you will, to proceeding with Emory Grover as the site for its staff administration building. On 2/11, next day, I will be meeting with our finance director. And I think, as I've done in the past years, is I'll bring Rick Zambone with me. As you all know, Rick has past experience being a member of the finance committee. And I think at one time he was chair of the finance committee. And so his experience and knowledge is really valuable. And I've relied on it over the last number of years. And so I'm going to bring him with me to the meeting. I trust no one is offended by that. I think that others could come along to that meeting as well, but at some point, I think if we reach a quorum, we'll have open meeting law problems. So if you do want to attend, let me know. Otherwise, it's going to be me and Rick and Karis meeting with our finance director, and that's on February 11th. Next item up are our proponent presentations, and tonight we only have one, and that is FY 2209 Walker Pond improvements. We can have the liaisons introduce the representative of the proponents, and then we can hear from that representative, him or herself. Does it make sense? Okay, so the proponents are Rick Zambone and Laura Dorfman, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
There are, if you notice on your Zoom attendee list, there's 7 additional people, including Cindy Chasson, Katie King, and Stacy Mulroy from the town, or from the Park and Rec Commission, and there's a number of folks there from the Walker Pond Association. I'm not sure, Mr. Chair, how you want to do that. You want to let them in, or you just want to have the presenter and then everyone else can chime in by raising their hand or doing something like that? I leave that up to you.
So so this is not a public hearing. We're going to hear from the proponents. If the proponents want to yield some of their time for someone who is participating as an attendee, then we'll address it at that time. I don't know that this is the forum where I want to hear from a lot of different people either advocating for the position or for the project or speaking against it. But if their role is integral to the proponent's presentation, we'll hear from them. Okay.
That's fine. Mr. Chair, for the presenting for the proponents is Tony Dalgazzo, the town engineer. He's been very helpful, along with the other folks that I mentioned previously, on this project for Laura and I. And we had a meeting, I believe it was, my days are so confusing now. I believe it was last week we had a meeting, but I'd have to check my calendar. And we went through a little bit of discussion about the presentation, some of the questions they might expect from the committee members, and we kind of laid out some of the ground rules. Tony's ready to make a presentation, I believe. I don't know if how you're going to coordinate that, Tony, but it's a very good presentation, and we've had a lot of discussion. So, Tony.
Thank you, Rick. Mr. Chair, and the other committee members. The Walker Pond project is broken down into 3 categories. The first category has to do with the cleaning up of the water that's going into the pond within the sub-watershed area. Karis, could you pull up that map, the watershed map?
Tony, can you tell me, do you happen to know what the title of it is? I have a lot of documents from you on the project, so.
I believe it's called Watershed. It says Watershed.
Yep.
Thank you. So as you can see on this map, you see Walker Pond on the lower left-hand side. And then there's a heavy black line that goes around that area. That's the contributory watershed to Walker Pond. And that's what I was saying. It's the overall project for the improvements to the pond is broken down into 3 categories. So the first category has to do with addressing the water which is being directed into the pond. And that category is broken down to several elements. The first element has to do with the construction of vegetated areas. You can see them on this plan in a pink kind of color. It's showing where a strip of wildflowers, tree plantings, and tall grasses would go to interrupt the flow from the developed properties to the street and the catch basin and other stormwater elements that go to Walker Pond. This is being proposed so that the stormwater can be essentially cleaned and absorbed to the maximum extent that it can be prior to it reaching the pond. The second element has to do with the drainage system itself. There are 3 specialized manholes that will interrupt the flow. So the street system, which consists of catch basins and pipes, would be interrupted by these specialized manholes to help improve the water quality by removing leaves and debris and sediment before it discharges into the pond. The third element that I'd like to talk about is the tree trench construction, which is at the intersection of Russell and Walker Lane. That it's like a kind of a infiltration pit, a tree infiltration pit to address the water that's going to that system, that specialized stormwater treatment system. All of these discharge to Walker Pond, and they will all help to improve the water quality that's within the pond. If you've ever seen Walker Pond, especially say this past summer. You can tell that it's choked with vegetation. The vegetation is growing wildly because of the nutrients which are going to the pond, and that's what's causing the vegetation to grow wild. So in order to address that, we're proposing to cut down and remove as much of the nutrients as we can. This is all part of category 1. This is what we're coming to request funding from the committee tonight. It's estimated at $125,000, and it is the first step to addressing Walker Pond. The other 2 categories, the second category, which we anticipate coming to in the future for, would be to physically remove the excessive vegetation from the pond. That's done through a process called hydro raking. We would simply remove that vegetation, and once removed, the water clarity will return, and water quality in the lake, in the pond, will be improved. The third category is a sewer extension of a sewer main on the southwestern most side of the pond. Is Walker Lane. There are houses that have septic systems. There's 4 of them. They all are within 50 feet of the pond. And the sewage from these homes is a source of nutrients for the plants that are in the pond. So we intend to extend the sewer line. We have one person, one property, which the Board of Health is requiring to connect. And we have commitments from the other homeowners expressing their desire to connect once the sewer main becomes available. So those are the 3 categories. The sewer main project was approved by town meeting, special town meeting, last October. And we are moving forward with that project in the spring. And that will address the efforts that we intend to make for the cleaning up of the Walker Pond health. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, Tony, let me first, Mr. Doug Gazo, this is Chair Peter Pingator. Thank you for the presentation. It was brief, but informative. Now, do you know, or are there any other participants who are listening in who are integral to the part of to any part of your presentation? That is, were you expecting to have somebody else here to add additional information in connection with the presentation?
I understand that there are several people that were intending to attend. I'm not sure if they did. Roy Kramer is one of them. And then there are neighbors that are probably attending this meeting. There's also Stacy Mulroy, who I believe is intending to attend this meeting. If she would like to say anything.
No, that's see what that's my job.
Oh, Okay.
I'm trying to find out. See, I'm trying to tease out if there's anyone else out there that's integral to your presentation. It doesn't sound like that there is. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So, because, I know the people are listening in, but as I said, and to be fair to the process for everyone who applies, for all people who make grant requests, we have a public hearing, and that's where the public gets to participate. So here we're listening to proponents. So there may be a particular question that might come up by a committee member, and there may be someone who's listening in who can answer that question. We'll deal with it at that time. Okay. So what we'll do is, you're an old hand at this, is that we're going to go through this in alphabetical order. I'm going to call each committee member's name and ask for any comments or questions. We go in alphabetical order. We're going to start with Mr. Albert.
I have no questions or comments at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Barnes.
Yes, thank you, Tony. Couple of questions. You may have mentioned this at an earlier presentation, but the manholes that will be installed, they would require cleaning on a regular basis, I suspect, with the accumulation of debris that runs through them?
Yes, that's correct. And they would be added to the best management practices, the structural best management practices that the town is required to add through the EPA permit.
Okay, so there's no additional funding necessary through town meeting, that this would just become part of the DPW or whoever would normally be handling this type of thing. They would just add that to their list of duties, right?
Yes, in fact, we've already added it.
Okay. There are 3 steps, 2 of them requiring funding. Your application is for step 1 only. Is there any reason why you didn't ask for funding for step 2 as well? Is it a matter of the timing, that the first step will take an undisclosed amount of time and you want to wait until that's done before you go for the second step? It appears as though it's a project that needs funding on a couple of different levels, and you only have 1 here.
That's correct. We really do need to clean up the inputs going into the lake before we actually go and remove the vegetation. Included with that second category is a testing and monitoring program. So we would after the category 1 was completed, we would then kind of get a baseline condition. And then we have a monitoring program that lasts for 5 years. That's part of category 2. And we don't want to actually do that before we address the water quality improvements. If we did that, it would, the vegetation could grow right back. We really do need to make sure that category 1 is done and completed prior to category 2.
Okay, so we could anticipate seeing you again next year or the year after for category 2 funding, is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Okay, Mr. Crocker.
Hi. No, I mean, everything is as I was expecting and so forth, and Tony did a great job. So no, I don't have anything further to add at this point, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dermody.
Good evening. Thank you, Tony, for the presentation. A question on the map, the watershed map, which I find fascinating due to its thoroughness and extent. So if I understand correctly, all the fuchsia colored symbols on the plan are planting.
I don't mean to interrupt. Can we bring the map up? Is that okay?
Oh yeah, sorry, I was looking at my own copy.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yep. Good idea, though.
Okay.
Yep. So if I just would like a little elaboration on those, what they're composed of, how they're built, and it seems to involve a large number of private homeowner lots. And well, I guess that's my question. Is it on private land? Is it on public ways and right of ways? How is that just deployed? It's impressive, but it's extensive. So if you could just talk a little bit about that, please.
Certainly. So I suppose I should have mentioned the Walker Pond project was advanced by the neighborhood. The neighborhood to Walker Pond was very desirous of having the town take steps to improve the water quality in Walker Pond. So part of the effort is not just the public portion. There are some areas that are actually within the town's right-of-way or on town property where we are proposing what you were referring to as the fuchsia areas shown on the map. Those areas are 8-foot wide strips of plantings that include a specialized wildflower mix and certain trees and certain types of grasses, kind of tall grasses that have clumpy type roots to them. And those are all actually going to be presented to the Conservation Commission in probably the next month or two from what we call our Total Watershed Committee that put together the special kind of mix. So that's what those fuchsia areas are.
Okay. Who will install them?
So the town would install the ones that are on town property, and the homeowners would install them on their own property.
Well, that's wonderful. And I should have said at the beginning, I think this is a good project for the town and for the neighbors, a good partnership potentially. And I guess one final question would be, the neighbors who are willing to put these in, is there some kind of a system that they get checked off when it's completed, that they put in the right plants in the right place, that kind of thing?
So I mentioned that we're making a presentation to the Conservation Commission specifically addressing the specific type of wildflower mix. And we are including at least one, if not two locations where the seeds can be purchased and what you have to do in order to install this. It's really, the homeowner could actually do it themselves if they wanted to, or they could hire a landscaper if that's the way they take care of their property. However they like to do it. It's a very simple thing to do, but it is highly effective, specifically due to the roots of the plantings that get planted. And I could go into all kinds of technical information on that, but suffice it to say, these types of plantings make the soil a more living soil with bacteria and fungi and nematodes and all kinds of healthy microorganisms, which in turn makes the soil able to absorb about 4 times as much water as a typical lawn would. And then the water that gets absorbed is actually treated in a much more efficient manner than anything that could soak in through your standard lawn.
Okay. Thank you for that. I guess let's move on. Thank you.
Okay, so Ms. Dorfman.
Hi, thank you. Just 2 little questions. We've had some meetings on this, so I apologize for not asking these earlier. Is it possible, like you have the educational materials in step 1, and I'm wondering, can that be pushed off? Well, or more importantly, can that be funded elsewhere by, you know, the neighbors or some sort of fundraising effort or something else? Just wondering if that has to be in step 1.
I believe it does have to be in step 1. The educational materials consist of brochures and signs and other markings within the sub-watershed area, helping to educate the neighborhood so that they know, what they do in that area has a direct effect on Walker Pond.
Okay.
I would also like to say that the education, how do I put it? How to install those 8-foot wide strips, the wildflower, tree, and tall grass. That information will be written down into the brochure with the places that people could contact, so that everybody will know, and they can refer to it if they wanted to, say, make some modifications to the area.
Okay, thank you. And then just one other question is, you have a tree trench profile in the presentation from the town of Watertown. And I'm sure it's just an example of like how the trees should be planted, but like this project, it seems, was related to road work. So how does this relate to what we're doing here, protecting Walker Pond?
So one of the ways in which to improve water quality in the pond is to infiltrate the water into the ground. And by doing that, the microorganisms in the ground will work on the water quality as it filters through the soil. That water, that groundwater, goes to Walker Pond. So what we did was we requested some assistance because this Walker Pond project is our pilot project for the town. It's the first one. And we asked them if they could help us design a tree trench, I believe is what they're calling it, system. So
I'm sorry, do you mean the town of Watertown?
No, we asked.
Who did you ask for assistance? Oh,
Needham.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. I'm just wondering how it relates to the presentation you have here for a concept plan from the town of Watertown for a road work.
We are, well, I believe that's where our Conservation Commission got the source information for the tree.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gerstle.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Zimmerman.
Could I just interrupt, Mr. Gerstle? Tony, do you have a drawing of that trench somewhere that you could throw up on the screen?
Yes, we did include that in the materials. It's called Tree Trench.
In the materials. All right, we're kind of moving on, right? So if somebody else has a question about it, or if Laura wants to ask additional questions, then we'll do that. But there may be some additional questions, so we may want to get that at least handy. And maybe perhaps there's a side cut of the manholes as well, because those appear to be the largest. Those are the costs involved in this phase one, correct? The tree trench and the manholes. Those are the lion's share of the cost, correct?
I would say it has a significant amount of the cost.
Okay. All right, so let's get those handy. And then Laura Dorfman, if you have additional questions, let us know. Do you?
With respect to the manholes?
No, tree trench. Any additional questions?
No, I was just curious because from what I looked at, the Watertown.
Okay, all right. So I got it.
No, what I was saying was that was related to a roadwork project, not protection of a pond. I was just trying to find the relationship between the two. That's all.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Chairman, I could clarify that briefly. The reason why it's connected to a roadway project is because it takes the water from the roadway in its drainage system. It takes that, puts it into the tree pit, and then gets discharged into the pond, as opposed to the water going directly into the pond.
Okay. So another way of putting it is there are different applications for the tree trench concept, one of which could be roadway, one of which could be, in this case, dealing with whatever catch basin or surface water, other kind of surface water coming into it and then filtrating, correct? Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, all water from this area goes into the pond.
Right.
The idea is to try to treat it before it gets there.
Right. Okay. Let's, okay, Mr. Gersel.
No questions at this time.
Okay, Ms. Kirk.
No questions at this time. I thought that was a great proposal, great presentation, very understandable.
And Rick Zimbo, questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I was just trying to short circuit my questions here. I was going to ask Tony to put up the cross-sectional drawings for both of those because they are integral to the project. And I thought it would help the committee members in understanding a little bit more detail about what they are and what the functions and roles are for all of those. And
I think that makes sense. Let's get
that's
those
why
up
I asked the question.
Yep,
So.
let's get those up on the screen. Those are part of our materials, but let's view them now.
Sorry, did I miss something?
Yeah, Karis?
Yes.
Could you put the tree trench PDF up and then the specialized manhole PDF?
Yeah. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so now we'll turn back to Rick Zambone. Rick?
Yeah, I just wanted to basically have Tony just show it to the committee and explain a little bit about what the cross section was and how it basically works. You know, like what's the, you know, what is this, like a crushed stone or gravel around a tree and everything kind of slopes to the roots, or how does it work?
I'm curious about locations as well and how many.
Just one. It's at the intersection of Russell and Walker Lane. And the water would, just as Rick was saying, it goes to the tree area, which then goes into that, the trench configuration where you have the water so that where it can be stored until it soaks into the ground. And there's an overflow from the system that goes back into the drainage system in case you have a storm of a higher intensity. By the way, storms of higher intensity are not the problem. It's usually the first inch or so when it first starts raining, and it washes what you might think of as dust and pathogens from the road surfaces and the lawn surfaces. It's that first flush is what they call it. That would go in here and it will actually help the tree grow as the water goes through its roots and then into the tree trench area where it can be stored until it soaks into the ground.
All right, and then Tony, would you talk about the manhole or the sump, whatever it's called?
And Tony, can we have a cross section of that put up as well?
So this is the cross section of the kind of manhole that we'll be installing. It's specialized because manholes don't have sumps or any other type of system other than to redirect the flow that's coming from pipes into the manhole and then out of the manhole, like at an angle point type of thing. This is a 6-foot diameter manhole. Typical manholes are only 4 feet in diameter. It also has a 4-foot sump in it. One of the problems with the stormwater is phosphorus. And the major source of phosphorus is from leaves. So, you know, if you've ever looked inside of, say, the catch basins in the street, you know, where the grates are, the water goes into them, you'll oftentimes see leaves that get in there, and the leaves disintegrate slowly and release the phosphorus that's within them, kind of like you know, when you have a cup of tea and you put the tea bag in the water and then the water turns color, brown or whatever. That is the kind of flavoring going into the water. Well, same thing with the catch basins. You get the leaves disintegrating. Some of them get broken up. They actually escape the catch basin. And this is a last ditch effort, so to speak, to trap the leaves and to give the system a little bit longer time to act on the removal of leaves and any other debris or sediment that may have escaped the drainage system before it gets discharged into the pond. So if you can see the pipe coming into this structure. This structure actually has a solid cover. It's off to the side of the road so that we can maintain it. We can open up the cover. We can vacuum out the contents. It also has a elbow on the outlet pipe to try to minimize any of the floatables, that's debris or leaves or anything that will float to the top of the surface. For example, as well, let's stick with leaves. So as the leaves decay, if they get into smaller pieces, they don't sink to the bottom of the water column. They'll float on top. So this would actually help to lessen the amount that would go into the pond.
Thank you, Tony. I think that's helpful. Just moving on to my next question. Again, this is another one, kind of a follow-up to one of the questions that Joe Barnes had. Has to do with the other phase of the project, or the next phase of the project. And I know it's in the application, but I keep forgetting the number. But what was the total cost of the next phase? Was it 300 and something thousand?
Yeah, 350,000, give or take.
Okay.
That amount was adjusted when the neighborhood really wanted the monitoring program, the testing of the water quality, and then the 5-year monitoring program to be included with the removal of the vegetation. So that's now about 350,000, give or take.
Okay, great. Tony, thank you very much. I appreciate your help here on this. It's great.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks, Tony. I have a couple of questions. So we started out with the map with the vegetation that we're going to be planting. We don't need to see that again. I noted that it looked like plantings were only on one side of the pond and not on the other. Why is that?
Because the topography, that black line that I was mentioning, that is the watershed area. And what a watershed area is it defines the area of the ground which will flow to a specific point, in this case, Walker Pond. So
I'm actually speaking about the actual pond area. Sorry, I wasn't clear about that. I understood why you would locate. I got to understand the concept in terms of the watershed area, but around the pond in particular, it looked like there were plantings only on one side and not on the other, and I'm wondering why that is. That is right around the circumference of the pond.
Oh, okay. Well, it certainly doesn't preclude that. However, I had mentioned category 3, which has to do with the extension of the sewer main. And then I mentioned that the houses that are on that side of the pond, they are intending to connect. They've expressed their desire. I believe that they did submit an email basically indicating that they all want to do that. So we would certainly encourage them after that's done, if they wanted to do that could only help further. But right now, I don't think it would be a good idea to install those until after they have actually connected.
Okay, so so the area where we don't have plantings involve house lots that are not tied into the town sewer. Is that correct?
Only on that side of the pond.
Correct.
That's only on that side of the pond. We don't have these vegetated areas everywhere. If you look at the map, they're not.
I'm just saying that what jumped out at me is that the vegetative areas are only on one side of the pond, at the water's edge, if you will, but it's not on the other. And I'm just wondering why that is. You know, why don't we have it all the way around the pond?
Right. It's specifically because I have no idea when they're going to connect. If they connect this year or next year or whenever they do connect. They've all indicated a desire to connect. I just don't have that information. But after they make that connection, which involves construction, they're going to have to dig right through the area where you might want to be putting these vegetated strips. So, I mean, I wouldn't suggest that they install those vegetated strips until after they've connected to the sewer.
Okay, so getting back to the vegetative strips, with respect to the vegetative strips that are on private property, I take it that there's no way to compel the homeowners to install and maintain the strips. Am I right about that?
That's correct. They have a Walker Pond neighborhood committee where people that, not just the people that live on Walker Lane, but people within the area that like to use Walker Pond for recreational purposes, they all have expressed an interest in improving the water quality of Walker Pond, all of them. So nobody is forcing anyone to do anything, but we will be sending out the educational materials so they understand what it means and how it benefits the pond itself, and therefore improves their enjoyment of the pond.
Okay.
So, they would be encouraged, but nobody is going to force anyone.
Okay. And then when the highlighted areas on the map, when the vegetative strips, can you give us a rough estimate of the percentage that are on public versus private properties?
Oh, I would say probably between 5 and 10% are on public.
Is on public, okay. And are part of this funding going to pay for the installation of the vegetative strips?
The ones on public property, yes.
Only on public property. Okay, okay. And then with respect to the tree trench, do we have any experience? Have we installed a similar kind of trench anywhere else in Needham?
I don't, well, similar, yes, but not like this. That's why we went to the Conservation Commission for their help. And we do feel confident that we certainly could construct what they are proposing that we construct.
I saw that it was represented that the Conservation Commission designed the trench. They didn't design it, right? We had an engineer. We're going to have an engineer design it, or did they actually design the trench?
I'm using the word design kind of a little bit loosely because we asked for their help as to what we should do and what we could do to help out Walker Pond. And they originally suggested a tree infiltration pit, but changed it to a tree trench because they felt that would be more effective in handling the water quality aspects. So they've given us enough information for us to be able to put this out to a contractor. In that information they gave us enough information for us to be able to do it. We will not have to hire an engineer to design something that's more specific to this spot. That we can do ourselves, and we will do that ourselves.
And now turning to the manholes, there are 3, as I recall, right? By looking at the map. Do I have that right? 3, okay. Do we have any experience in town installing a similar kind of engineering system as those manhole covers? Yeah, those manholes.
Yes, we do. We've done these at Broad Meadow School. Actually, several of the schools, including Sunita Williams. The PPBC has done those. We have installed these systems. They're not round. They were tanks. They were rectangular. We did that at the intersection of Mark Tree Road and Perry. Is it Perry Road or Perry Drive? We've installed a few of them.
Okay, and any in connection with inputs, if you will, to a water body?
One of these tanks at a water body?
And does that, you understand the question, and does the question make sense?
Well, everything eventually goes to a pond or a water body, so yeah. I guess yes.
Okay. Well, let's put it this way. Was it any other experience where you're basically kind of cleaning up inputs, if you will, to a pond, you know, like this?
Using this particular system?
Yes.
Not using this particular system.
And I okay. And my last question is, is it fair to say that this is in a way similar to the town reservoir? We're addressing inputs into the pond, at least with respect to this project, right? That's what this project really focuses on.
Well, the Walker Lane project, we've already gone through all of the thinking and what we would have to do. The reservoir is a hope.
Okay. Let's just focus now on Walker Pond. But the funding here, we're really addressing inputs.
Yeah, we are addressing the input going into Walker Pond, yes.
Okay. Phase 2. In a way, I mean, phase 2 kind of focuses on the water body itself, if you will. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it does.
And then phase 3, that's our extension of our sewer, and that's another project that's being funded through a different department, if you will. Correct?
It's town meeting appropriated funds, and then 1/3 of those funds, the town will be reimbursed 1/3 from the abutters.
Okay. It's
a betterment type of process.
I was going to ask you, but that's kind of outside of our lane, if you will. So, okay. And I think that that's the extent of my questions. Okay, so now what we do is we do this kind of rapid fire. So people put their hands up, physically put their hands up, and then I call. Okay, so, all right. I think I think Laura's hand may have been up first, and then we're going to go to Bob Dermody. Okay.
Really quick, Tony, and the other sort of category 5 bodies of water that the town's addressed, were there ever any of these manholes involved? Do you know?
No, I don't think so. No, because we had already done the inputs to Rosemary Lake, and I don't believe we had this particular type of manhole. We did other types of things, It all depends on what the impairments are. But for Rosemary Lake, for example, there is a manhole at the end of Lake Drive. It's not the same as this manhole. It's different. And that's because of the steep slope. We called it a plunge pool. It's where the water pours in and then it gets all moiled around and splashes. And by doing that, it oxygenates itself. Oxygen is put into the water, and then it goes down that steep rip-rap slope where it mixes with the air and then goes into Rosemary Lake. So it's not the same kind of structure, but you know, it is a structural BMP that we did. We also did the infiltration basin that's on the Rosemary Pool parking lot. It's surrounded by a black fence, if you've seen it. And that takes the water from the library and also the high school. It also, by the way, takes some of the street water, and it sends it out into a steep rip-rap slope, which then goes down into that infiltration basin. And whatever can soak into the ground does so, and whatever can't overflows into Rosemary Lake surface-wise. I mean, there are multiple little things that we've done, not even to mention the stormwater general bylaw for the private properties, putting in the dry wells at the corners of the buildings to take the roof water and soak it into the ground. That removes a lot of phosphorus, estimated at 3,500 square feet on each property. So there's multiple things that we've done, we continue to do. And in terms of Walker Pond, we will be doing. We'll be doing through the general permit that goes beyond this specific to Walker Pond, the area that's specific to Walker Pond itself. We'll be doing that throughout the entire area. You notice, if you look at the map, you'll notice that those fuchsia colored vegetated strips, they're only in the area that are right around the pond. But that black line goes way beyond that. The area beyond that area that's specific to Walker Pond, that water will go to Walker Pond eventually, but it's covered under the town general NIPD's efforts to clean up stormwater all over the place.
And then just one quick question, and maybe it's a question for the CPC committee, but Tony, you said earlier that with some of those Category 5 water bodies, the inputs had been done already. Were they funded by CPC? Do you know?
The only one that we've done is Rosemary Lake. And Rosemary Lake is not, so there are 5 Category 5 water bodies in town. Rosemary Lake is the source water for Rosemary Brook. And Rosemary Brook has been designated a Category 5 water body. The second one is the source water of the reservoir, which discharges into Alderbrook. Alderbrook is a Category 5 water body. The third one is Fuller Brook. That's near Wellesley, off of Great Plain Avenue. That'll be a future project. The last 2 Category 5 water bodies designated by the EPA back in, I don't know, 2003, I think is when they originally did it. Those, about a month ago or so, got letter grades of A.
Right.
Charles River Watershed Association.
Yep.
If that stays, if they maintain that A grade, we won't have to do anything for those two.
Yeah,
And
you said that before. I remember that. Yeah,
that's it for the Category 5 water bodies. That's it. Walker Pond is not one of them. Not that we don't care about Walker Pond. It obviously is suffering, but it's just not designated by the EPA as a Category 5 water body.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Bob Dermody.
Yes, thank you, Tony. Back to the map and the colored planting strips. It's good that the town is focusing right around the pond and where they can put them in their rights of way. The tree stumps will help, but there seems to be a large number of these. It's still within the watershed, obviously. What is the level of requirement number of these to get done? Is the project going to be successful if they're not done? Is there some kind of grading system or a like the worst case, say nobody decides to do it? I don't think that'll happen, but is the project still going to work?
I don't believe that's the case either. They have expressed,
but there's no guarantees. So I'm just trying to protect, the CPC efforts. So what happens? Is the project still going to work?
I would say sooner or later, because the town still has to do its efforts under NPDES that will have an impact on the pond. It's just not specific to the pond. Will it work?
Again, it's a worst case scenario, but I thought I should ask because we're thinking of funding this. We want it to work. I want it to work. I have full confidence in my neighbors that they care about this pond, but it's just, I think it's a fair question.
Well, you know something? Everybody has expressed a desire to do this. Even if they don't all do it, will it work? Yeah, it'll
Good.
still work.
That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions by any members of the committee? Okay, I have a couple of quick questions, if you will, Tony. So I think based on our discussion from last week concerning the reservoir, and I assume this your answers, I think I know what your answer is going to be, but you're not aware of any CPC funded projects which address inputs into a pond. Oh, now we have Karis raising her hand. She's gonna. So what? Oh, and all right. So why don't we have Tony? If you're aware of any, let me know, and then we'll hear from Karis. Okay.
So
all right, let's Tony ask. I don't want to put you on a hot seat, Tony. If you don't, I was
going to say I'll defer to Karis because she has more knowledge.
Good.
I would just say I did do a little bit of research on the Community Preservation Coalition's website where they have the detail of all of their projects. And it does look like there have been other communities that have done projects similar in to this nature.
Okay, that's helpful. That's helpful, but not my question, but that is helpful. So we don't have any record in Needham of funding inputs like this.
No, this is one of the first projects that we're doing, at least not that I'm aware of.
Okay, and then hopefully this is my final question. Do you anticipate seeking funding for similar kinds of projects with respect to the other ponds, that we were listed on the spreadsheet that you had attached in connection with the reservoir grant request?
We don't currently have any plans for that. Not that I'm aware of, going to the CPC for funding for that. Not that we couldn't. I suppose we could if there was some kind of recreational or open space type of value. But we don't have any plans to do that.
Okay.
Only the Category 5 water bodies had we considered seeking help from the CPC.
With respect to inputs on those water bodies.
Well, with respect to everything and anything that we need in order to improve the water quality.
All right, so but that's a little different than what we've done to date, though, correct? Because we haven't, CPC has not funded inputs into those Category 5 waterways, correct?
Not that I'm aware of.
Right. Okay. All right. I want to just identify where we're going with this and where we could potentially end up. That's all. That's fine. All right. Mr. Barnes.
Quick question, Tony. If this project is approved and moves forward to a town meeting and it's approved there, does this get on a list of projects that the town has, or will it be something that will be probably begun in summer, or is it a fall project, or just on a list? What do you think?
Well, the money won't become available until July 1st.
Right.
So, you know, it would be great if we could start this between July 1st and November 30th. That would certainly be our intention. We would pursue it right away. In terms of like the next category, that would be at least a year away. And then we would start, the first thing would be the testing to get the baseline information, and then the vegetation removal. And we would be continuing the testing, you know, for a full 5 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Good. All right, and Karis, by the way, thank you for finding out that information. That is really helpful, by the way, in terms of the scope of application for the CPC funding. Okay. All right. Thank you, Tony. And we'll be moving on now to liaison updates on each of the applications. And we'll begin with Emery Grover, 2201.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Tony. Mr. Chair, I don't have anything that's new. I reached out to Henry Half to ask if there was any further discussion of the project. He did not have anything new. He sent, once again, a PDF of the project itself, some of the due diligence questions that have been answered, but it was nothing new. But given the fact that they are coming before us soon, I wanted to see if there was anything that I should know or we should know. And I guess the answer is no.
Okay, and so I'm going to have the chairs meeting on 2/10. Our next meeting is on 2/17. So I may have some information to share with the committee. And if I do, I'm going to share it in advance of our 2/17 presentation. Okay?
Okay.
All right, great. Okay, 2202, preservation of town of Needham marriage records. I'll just add that I had put together due diligence questions that Teddy Eaton had completed. And so I would just kind of put that in your file. It's part of your package for this evening. It's kind of breaks down the cost a little bit and gives us a little more detail. And I found it very helpful. So her answers are very helpful and in my mind, pretty persuasive. So that information is available to you as part of your packet tonight. 2204, Town Common Historic Redesign and Beautification.
Mr. Chair, there are no updates at this time unless my colleague, Mr. Dermody, has any updates. None at this time.
All set.
Thank you. And now let's go on to 2205 Fisher Street Trailhead.
Looks like we lost Artie.
It's Artie, right?
Lost the party.
Okay.
Oh, poor Artie.
All right, so that, okay.
No
And
update.
then, 2206 synthetic track at DeFazio.
I can let Laura confirm, but I think we have nothing to add this evening.
Okay.
We don't. I mean, we went through this last year. I don't think that much has changed, right, Paul?
I don't think anything has changed.
Yeah, I mean, we've been pretty thorough.
Yeah.
There's not much to talk about at this point. We'll have our public hearing and we can go from there. Okay.
Right.
Okay, good. McLeod Field renovations.
That's also Artie.
Okay. So that one is another one of those projects where we probably want a little more detail on the breakdown between what's being done in terms of infrastructure and what's being done for the surface. And I'll take that upon myself to put together those due diligence questions. Chris, you have your hand up.
Just one quick update. I know I did actually talk with Artie earlier today. He has had a conversation with Ed Olson. What the contents of that was, I was not privy to, but they have been talking back and forth. So I bet you if Artie was here, he would have an update, but I know that they have been talking about the project, and Karis is going to back me up on that.
All right, Karis.
I was just going to indicate if the snow melts, we did experience another sinkhole
Yes.
a few weeks ago, and it's if you want to see the impact that it has on the playing surface, it's pretty clear visually if you happen to go by DeFazio.
Okay. So what we'll do is, with respect to those kind of breakdowns, it's helpful again to have written answers so the record's pretty clear. And I could check with Artie if he has information from Ed in written form, and if he doesn't, I could follow up with some additional questions. Okay. Trail identification, professional design services. That's mine. I have no additional information. That was a good presentation. And again, it having been on our cycle in last year, we've kind of gone through that thoroughly. We're just, basically we're ready for our public hearing and a vote. Town reservoir sediment removal, 2210. Paul.
Yeah, we're expecting some due diligence questions to come our way. And then when we get them, Penny and I will review them and maybe add to them, and then we will get them out to Tony Delgazo and ask him to respond.
So if I can add, I did put together those due diligence questions for you folks. But now I'm thinking a little bit more about what Karis brought up. This sounds like there may be some Community Preservation Alliance information that would be helpful for the proponents to have. I don't know if they want to do that. I don't know if it's appropriate for Karis, for us to ask Karis to do that or not. I really don't, Karis. You want it?
Karis, if you've got the time to do it, it would be great.
It is a searchable database using Boolean connectors. So you can just want to point that out to everybody on the committee.
Thank you, Peter.
It's not as easy as natural language. It's not as easy as Google.
Understood.
But it's doable. Okay.
It's Mr. Chair. I was on it a couple of weeks ago, and it is fairly easy to use. You can sort by project, by time frame, by town. There's a lot of stuff you can, subject matter, a lot of stuff you could do. Very easily done by someone who teaches at the college level.
Okay.
Duly noted.
I was going to say, Mr. Chair, that I am reaching an age where my ability to work with computer science is actually decreasing as time goes on rather than increasing.
Okay, that's fine. But I just want to point out the reason why I mentioned that it was Boolean searchable is because that's something that you and I learned how to use when we searched electronic databases back in the 80s. That's all. What I'm saying is, hey,
I wasn't searching electronic databases in the 80s.
It's like return to, you know, it's.
I was going to libraries and pulling out books.
Back to the 90s. You don't want to go back to the 90s. That's fine. Okay. I think that's it for our liaison updates. And we're going to kind of, we may want to have a continuing discussion, if you will, or rolling discussion on increasing bucket amounts. I just put that in there. And this is timely because we do have a meeting with our finance director on 2/11. And so maybe we can hear from Rick. You gave us a pretty good summary last go round, but I'll put this, you know, you've got the rock, so to speak, on this. You have the floor. And so why don't you advance the discussion?
Mr. Chair, I think as a committee, what we probably need to do is think about first whether we want to put additional funding into the affordable housing bucket for future use. Even though there's been no project identified for it, we could reserve additional funds, fully anticipating we're going to get requests for that down the road. And the purpose really behind that would be to indicate that the town is very supportive of affordable housing projects and that we set aside additional money to do that. And in so doing, we're not precluding other people from applying, but what we're doing is we're sending a message that it's no longer necessarily going to be on a first come, first serve to get funding for a project. That, you know, we take a look at the capital plan. If the capital plan is heavily weighted on open space, recreational, or historical renovations, then, and there's no projects in the queue for affordable housing type projects, that as a committee, we believe, and this is the statement you'd be making, is as a committee, we believe that we need to reserve or protect the ability of affordable housing to gain funding in an environment that recently has been favoring or has been providing funding to the other buckets. So, or coming out of the general fund. And that's just it's an approach, and we should probably discuss it.
I have okay, so we have comments. First hand up is Paul Alpert and then Penny Kirk. And I do have kind of a suggestion about how I think we might want to proceed incrementally, but Paul Alpert first and then Penny Kirk.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, from the last discussion that we had on this, I was confused as to the process that we can use, because we were talking about setting aside money by funding a trust that would not be controlled by this committee. There would be an affordable housing trust that I believe would be funded, that would be controlled by the selectmen or some other trustee. And it sounded to me like if we wanted to fund if we wanted to set aside money by putting it into an affordable housing bucket, I was confused as to whether we could just do that and say we're setting aside money, you know, $10,000, $100,000 to go into our affordable housing bucket, setting it aside, or whether if we put money into a bucket, we have to put an equal amount of money into the other two buckets. And that's what it sounded like. And which was why we were talking about the trust fund, because I would like to set aside money if we're going to do it, if we can, by just putting it into the affordable housing bucket that we control.
Okay, so I'll let Rick respond to that because I think he has all the answers. And I think that we know the answers to that. But there may be one legal question that we may need to suss out, but I'm gonna let Rick respond. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and to respond to Paul's comments and questions, you can do it a number of ways. One of which would be, and some towns have done that, you can fund the affordable trust in your town, and you have to set up an agreement between the Community Preservation Committee and the trust that would protect the restrictions that the community preservation typically puts on projects or evaluates projects. And in the towns that did that, the trust had essentially the same review and process that we do as a committee. That's one way. That wouldn't be the way I would recommend doing it based on the research that I've done. The other way to do it is just as you suggest, that we overfund the affordable housing bucket. By overfund, I mean put in more than the typical 10% or 11%. And you can put as much or as little in as you want. You can do it over a number of years. If you put more money in one bucket, like the Affordable Housing Trust, you do not have to match it with funds in the other buckets. You could do 10% in historical, you could do 10% in open space and recreation, and you can do 30% in the Affordable Housing Trust. My thought process, and I may be taking some thoughts away from my chair, but my thought process would be we make a commitment over, say, the next 3 years as part of our planning process to allocate a specific dollar amount that would go into the bucket over and above the 10% towards affordable housing. So for example, if we were to look to fund $1 million into that bucket to just boost the amount of money that's there for affordable housing projects, we would do that over a 3-year period at $330,000 a year. So that's one way to do it. And you really, in doing that, you're kind of planning for the future. And when I was discussing the whole concept with, and his name keeps escaping me, the older I get, I keep forgetting him. He's the guy that runs the coalition. But
Stuart Saganor.
Thank you. And I'll forget it 5 minutes from now, Karis, but I appreciate it. His recommendation was for us to just do that. You don't have to change the plan. It's perfectly within our purview of what we're doing now. It doesn't require a rewrite of our plan. And the way you do that is when you come to the article that Peter presents to town meeting that talks about the allocation of the money in the buckets, part of that discussion that he would present would be that the recommendation to town meeting, because they have to approve it, would be to increase the amount of money earmarked for affordable housing. And there will be a discussion and there will be some voting on that. They can't increase the amount, but they can reduce it so that if they don't agree, then they can reduce down whatever we recommend. And that all goes back into the reserve fund. But that would be the way it would be proposed. At least that's the way it was explained. And I agree with that. So.
Thank you, Rick, because that was the answer I wanted to hear.
Okay, good. Anytime I can be helpful, Paul.
So I want to hear from Penny, but I just want to, just so we can close out this question. I do, well, actually, I have some ways of going forward. And so let's just hear from everybody first. So Penny, let's hear from you. You have a question and a comment or a comment.
Yeah, I like that second approach. That sounds really doable, but and it may be a matter of semantics, but we want to be sure that we're talking about low income housing as well as affordable housing. There is a difference.
Yep. Okay, any other comments?
So I would like that affordable, that low income housing be part of that bucket.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, so here's the way I view this, is that I think it's a great idea. I'm supportive of it. I think that there are a couple of steps in it in terms of being persuasive with town meeting, and also to address concerns that I think are going to come up. One is making the case, okay? Make the case. And I think that we have some data here which will show, that Karis has put together, and actually Bob has done his own chart about how we spent our funds since we've had CPC. So what I was going to suggest, if I may, is that Bob, if you're interested in working with Rick a little bit on, you can do as little as helping him make the case, which means your work is already done. And I'm going to steal his thunder just a little bit, but what you're going to find is that fully half of, say we have $45 million, $22 million has been spent on basically park and rec projects when we include the pool. And then about 16 million of it has been spent on historic preservation, okay? So very small amount, relatively speaking, very little amount of money has been spent on affordable housing. So, but what I'd like to do, I think that illustrates and helps make the case for why it is that we'd want to try to preserve some funds and make a statement and ensure that there is an appropriate allocation for affordable housing to come along. The second piece, hold on, sorry about that. All right, the second piece is that I think the questions are going to come up about, well, what is it that you're going to spend the money on? And I think that we probably need and that's really not Rick's problem in a way, but it would be helpful if we got some better feedback from affordable housing proponent and low-income housing proponents in town about what they anticipate doing coming down the pike. So that's always fallen on the shoulders of the housing authority. I do want to point out, a lot of towns have community development corporations and have a whole other population of people working on other kinds of affordable housing. We don't have that in this town. We have people who are volunteering their time as, in terms of citizen participation. They volunteer their time by being commissioners on the housing authority, but there aren't any citizen efforts to actually develop, to have community development corporations to develop other kinds of projects. So it really falls on the shoulders of the housing authority and the commissioners. So, but we need some input from the housing authority. And so we should find out, I guess, Penny, the question is, and you don't need to answer this now, but if we can get a stake in the ground about what the housing authority is going to do next in terms of redevelopment of Linden Chambers, what the potential cost is going to be, because we did allocate funds for a consultant. Where are we on that? Just so we can have we need an answer what we anticipate spending this money on. And then the third thing I think is kind of related that I'm concerned about is, although we're maintaining control by maintaining the bucket, do we feel comfortable? I just don't know the answer. When, Charles River, I can't remember, the Charles River Arc comes along and says, we found a lovely $1 million property on South Street that we want to buy and develop into housing for developmentally disabled adults. And we would like $2 million of CPC funds. Are we okay? I mean, can we say, no, we don't want to do that? We anticipate the housing authority coming to us and asking us for a lot more than that, and for the renovation in addition to Linden Chambers. So I just want to feel comfortable with that we actually can move off of the kind of first come, first serve basis. I'm sorry for the phone ringing in the background. So that's kind of.
Yeah, could I just jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Because I need to disclose the fact that I am the vice chair of the board at the Charles River Center or the Charles River Arc. So if we get into those conversations, I probably should be recusing myself if we have those conversations, because I know of plans that the Charles River Arc has. So I can't, I don't think I'd be able to participate in those part of the discussions. How I parse out that with respect to this whole project and the affordable housing bucket discussion, I'm not really sure. But in any event, I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. The other thing is that I did have a conversation with, and I believe it's Karen, the woman who was hired to work on the Affordable Housing Trust that at some
Karen
point.
Sonnenberg.
Thank you. I'm wonderful with names now, and it's getting worse as I get older. But, you know, she was very much interested in us pursuing this. And she also followed up with the discussion with, I think it's Katie King. And she in turn talked to our town manager. And yeah, whatever the names
Fitzpatrick.
are. Doesn't matter. Yeah, Kate Fitzpatrick. Thank you.
You're all, Rick.
Yeah, I'm on a roll, right. In any event, they're all in favor of us kind of pursuing this. I don't think it's gone beyond any further than Kate Fitzpatrick, but there was some preliminary discussions, just so that everybody's aware of that. So that's all. I'm done. I'm not going to talk anymore.
That's great. All right, that's very helpful. And then, so what in terms of advancing forward, I would ask Bob, see if you could work with Rick. We can kind of help make the case. Penny, you need to get some information from the Housing Authority in terms of what you anticipate spending them in the near future. And then the third question is kind of a Karis question, kind of a legal question, which is, can we actually say no to people? And, you know, can we actually say we're not a first come, first serve outfit with respect to this issue? We're going to be selective. We're going to be building up this bucket because we anticipate using it for X project. So now I should add as an aside, one reason that and I'm sorry we're going on with this, but I just want to put this information out there. One reason why you would want to increase the bucket for, say, a project that the Needham Housing Authority would come and request funds for is because the Needham Housing Authority is not part of our local government. You can't bond a project that the Needham Housing Authority wants to do. So if they want to rebuild in the chambers, they can't say, can we have $5 million and can we have a bond for that? They're not part of our government entity. They're a separate entity. And so we can't leverage our funds to fund a project of that size. Basically, it's cash only when it comes to essentially any affordable housing project in town, because the town has, when they develop the Affordable Housing Trust, there is an Affordable Housing Trust that is in place in this town. There were statements made on floor of town meeting by the proponents that there was no intention whatsoever of developing affordable housing through that mechanism. So I would say that their commitment to developing affordable housing through that mechanism is not there. Okay. All right, Laura.
So I've had some experience with this in my banking life. We don't need our own CDC by any means. There's plenty of CDCs in the state, and there's two very close to us. There's SMOC in Framingham, South Middlesex Opportunity Council, and then there's Metro West Collaborative Development in Newton. And I'm personally very close to the executive vice president, or the whatever his title is, of MACDC, which is the umbrella corporation. Also, there are banks that are desperate to give affordable housing money to projects. Desperate.
And want to explain why? Can you explain why?
Yeah, so yeah, I can. So there's this regulation called CRA, which stands for Community Reinvestment, the Community Reinvestment Act. Right. And what it does is it requires that banks make every effort they can to meet housing needs, particularly for low and moderate income and minority people in their communities. And many of our suburban communities are woefully behind the goal of the 25% affordable housing limit. And because banks are held to this standard of, you know, we don't get guidance on how we're supposed to do it. We just have to figure it out ourselves, and then we get examined on it. But there's a lot of pressure on banks to meet the requirements, to demonstrate that they have taken all these efforts, whatever they are, to try to meet the needs of low income and minority constituents. So there are any community bank, there's so many banks around here. They have foundations, they have CRA officers, they have funds, and that's another source. And it's sort of a collaboration. And, you know, we just shouldn't forget that.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? I think. All right. So let's see. Next, we're going to look at we have our prior meeting minutes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Chair, quick question. You referenced Bob Dermody having put together a chart. I'm wondering if Bob can provide that for the committee for us to view.
Yeah, I think that he would do that either now or at our next meeting, but that's part of the kind of making the case.
Yeah, and if I may jump in quickly, Mr. Chair, happy to do so. The chart, all I did was reorganize Karis's numbers that she sent to me very nicely. So I didn't create anything new. I just reorganized it, and what I did was year and category. So if there were 4 recreation projects, I added them all up, one number for that year for recreation. And it's very telling to look at it. And I even put colors on it.
But I would like you to vet that with Karis, okay? Because remember her experience. Like, remember what her day job is.
Duly noted.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, one other final comment. In your chairs meeting, you may want to mention to the Kay Fitzpatrick and the chair of the board that we're considering doing this.
I'm making a note. Will do. Duly noted. Okay, so now let's turn to our meeting minutes. I assume everyone's had an opportunity to review them. We need to have a roll call vote to approve them. So let's have a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Mr. Chair,
yes?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of January 20th, 2021 for the CPC.
All right, the motion is made by Mr. Gerstle.
I would second the motion.
It is second by Mr. Dermody. Discussion. Hearing none, let's have a vote, roll call vote.
I'd also like to add that the motion was made very properly.
Why, thank you.
It's the only thing he said all night.
He was waiting.
It's quality, not quantity.
You don't make fun of Chris when he participates.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Not fair. All right. That's not going to help him participate more.
Plays well with others.
Okay.
You have to wait.
Mr. Albert.
Aye.
Mr. Barnes.
Aye.
Artie Crocker is absent. Mr. Dermody.
Aye.
Ms. Dorfman.
Aye.
Mr. Gerstle.
Aye.
Ms. Kirk.
I think I have to abstain. I don't think I attended that meeting.
That's right. Okay, so you're abstaining. That's fine. And Mr. Zabot.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Next up is, excuse me. All right, that concludes our meeting. So we have no other issues. I'm always confused about this. In this meeting, do we make a motion to conclude to
make a motion to adjourn?
Okay.
I will second that motion,
okay,
Mr. Chair.
Let me get this on the record. Ms. Kirk made the motion, second by Mr. Gerstle. Wonderful, Chris. I love your continuing participation. Any discussion? Hearing none, let's have a vote. Mr. Albert.
Aye.
Mr. Barnes.
Aye.
Mr. Crocker is absent. Mr. Dermody.
Aye.
Ms. Dorfman.
Sorry. Aye.
Mr. Gerstle.
Aye.
Ms. Kirk.
Aye.
Mr. Zimbo.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Okay, thanks very much.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, good night.